Hello. Continuing with the stream of consciousness that is my wake up process, I've been thinking a little bit about the suite of behaviors we refer to as people pleasing. And I may be deluding myself, but it doesn't seem that I have the full suite of behaviors. However, I do have one tendency that makes me appreciate that I probably do have some issues around this. Um, for me, it's basically that I end up feeling like a dopamine dispenser. Yeah, because it's a natural social instinct to want to please others, but when we do it, maybe not even at our own expense, but without due reciprocity or within a context that is not healthy or mutual, um, best case, we're going to end up disappointed. Odds are we're going to be frustrated. And left to run unchecked over a period of time, this can give rise to resentment. And I'm very mindful of keeping resentment at bay because when we become resentful, it's an indicator that we're overlooking a share of our own responsibility in the way that if I'm kind to people with the expectation that they'll reciprocate, that's reasonable. You go out in the world and you say, "Hi, how are you?" And you expect people to be like, "Hey, good, how are you?" If they don't, then it's your responsibility to be like, "Okay, I'm going to take my toys and go play somewhere else. I'm not going to try and chase somebody down and be like, 'I got great toys. Don't you want to play with me?'" Right? You're going to be like, "Okay, let it blow by." But when we are dealing with more personal relationships, relationships in which we're more invested or are somehow dependent upon that structure, right? It gets a little more complex where we're like, oh, well, maybe they're just having a bad moment. Again, very reasonable to assume that somebody's not having the best time at that moment. Maybe they're not at full capacity and can't be expected to respond as we might expect. Fine, perfectly reasonable. But once that becomes a pattern, and the pattern is that we are giving a lot more than we are receiving, and we are finding ourselves disappointed, hurt, frustrated, confused, we might end up in conflict, we might end up stuffing our feelings, we end up becoming resentful. As soon as I start to feel, I think indignance is my exit ramp, where I'm like, hey, hey, I just put a lot of love into this and I'm getting a lot of crap in return, right? That's okay. Don't stick around. Hit that exit ramp, get off and find another route because resentment is poison if you don't heed the guidance and act accordingly. If you don't say, look, if I'm feeling resentful, that means my expectations are misaligned. I expect that there's a certain reciprocity in my relationships. And if other people can't reciprocate for whatever reason, whatever they got going on, you have to understand that your desire for that isn't enough to manifest that in real practice. So it's important to modulate what we give to others such that we aren't resting on unrealistic expectations and then becoming bitter towards the other people in our lives or the circumstances. We have a role to play in this, and it's very hard when we've got big hearts overflowing with a lot to give, but we need to build some dams and some floodgates around that and be able to control the flow of what we pour out and to know that there are good channels beyond those floodgates, that it's going to go to the right place and we're not just spending our reserves for nothing. It depletes us. It means there's less of us to go around. We not only spend the energy, but then we deal with the hurt, the frustration, the resentment, which makes us less available to other pursuits and other people. And it's not kind to steal from their column what others don't really deserve, honestly, as much as we would want it to be otherwise. It's so important to recognize that as soon as I start to feel these things, I've got to pull back a little bit on what I'm giving. You don't have to slam a door in anybody's face. You don't have to make declarations. You just have to honor your own boundaries and say, look, when I give this much, I need somebody to pour back in and keep that flow going. If you can't do that, my circuit's going to go dead over here. And it's my job to keep that running and keep my light on. And taking responsibility for that is ultimately much more kind, because it's said that we teach others how to treat us. And when we let others take and take and take and not be appreciative or respectful or reciprocal, we're teaching them that it's okay to behave that way. And if you care about people, teaching them the wrong lessons isn't loving, it's not kind. And if you want to give, that's fine, but you have to give and let go, or know that you're in an economy with somebody that nobody's going bankrupt on the deal, right? And if we're going to come to a place of resentment, that's not kind either. It's not. It's not kind to be like, I'll do these things and expect you to do those things. I don't communicate it. I don't enforce it. But then one day I finally get tired of it, and I do yell or withdraw or whatever the response might be. It's not ideal. There are better ways, and I know that sometimes that's all you can do is to withdraw, but ideally you're able to say to a person, listen, this is the minimum I can accept. If you can't meet that, I can't continue to engage in this deal with you, right? This is not a game I can afford to play if we're not all playing by rules that we can all agree upon, whether we understand them or not, that we say, okay, these are the rules. That's what it is when I say to somebody, look, this is what I need. That's me asserting a boundary, but really pardon, the only way to really enforce that is within myself, within my own choices and actions. And if I say, look, I can't be in these dynamics where, say, people are snapping at me or yelling at me or taking a lot and then behaving as though I'm a burden in some way. Okay, well, that's a limit for me. And what that means is I have to disengage and give far less to that relationship. And in some cases, it means we have to end the relationships. We do what we have to do to honor and enforce those boundaries with ourselves, which is hard because we don't want to lose these relationships. We don't want to have to withdraw from something that we value, but when the connection, the respect, mutuality isn't there, it's not good for anybody for us to persist. At that point, that's on us. That's our responsibility. So if you tend to be prone to these behaviors and you find yourself feeling like you're just there to make others feel good, your job's not to be a dopamine dispenser. Your job is to be a whole person living a whole life and to gather people around you who can be part of that and respect and support and contribute to that in some way, that we don't end up walking around in tatters with an empty bucket because we poured everything down the wrong well. So yeah, here's to finding better boundaries with ourselves and building relationships with people who do value that mutuality, who can be reciprocal, who can honor and respect our boundaries such that we don't have to remove ourselves. But in the cases where that is required, I wish us all the strength and the clarity to do what is necessary to protect ourselves and be able to provide for the people who can meet us where we are. All right, that's what I got for that for now. As always, I thank you for coming along, and I look forward to seeing you in the next round. Take care.